this is Dave Feldberg, and welcome to my new podcast called Disc Golf, An Honest Take. Now, I wanted to start the podcast, the very first one, by explaining why it is I'm doing the podcast and a little bit about the format. So, first things first, why am I doing this podcast? Well, I noticed that over the years, players like myself who gave reviews at the professional level always had some alliance with a brand. Now that I don't have an alliance directly with a manufacturer of discs, I'm able to give honest reviews about all the discs out on the market and not be jaded by someone's paying me or, telling me I need to review a disc. I'm able to pick the disc that I want to review and give you an honest review. Next, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the format. The format of this show will be like this. Every week we will cover some new releases. Then we will go through the discs I'm reviewing, which this week will be putters. And we'll start with speed 1 and 2, moving ourselves by the end of the year to speed 14. We'll also have a section called Mail Call, where people will send in their questions and I'll answer those no matter what they are. And then we'll also have a NG Corner, followed by a spot I call Legends of the Game, which we'll get to later. Also, real quick, while we're doing this format thing, I want to explain to you how my reviews work. I have people helping me in the 7 to 800 range, 8 to 900 range, 9 to 1,000 range, and myself over 1,000. And what we're going to be doing is giving you feedback on how the discs work for yourself and an overall review. So, how I'm doing it is I want people to think about speed. Speed and how fast you throw the disc really plays a factor in what disc you should choose. It doesn't have much to do with the disc as much to do with how fast you're throwing it. If you throw a bunch of discs and you're only throwing 30 miles an hour, they'll all land within 5% of each other. But as you go up in speed, you'll start to see the difference in the flights. So what I've done is I've characterized that the 7 to 800 level players are throwing about 30 to 50, and that the 8 to 900 level players are throwing 50 to 60, and the 900 to 1,000 level players are throwing 60 to 70, and of course the pros are throwing 70 to 80 and sometimes 80 plus. So when I refer to a rating, I will say things like for the 7 to 800 level, and what I'm referring to is the speed again. So just look at the graph here on the screen and you'll see that, and hopefully that makes a lot of sense to you. Now before we get started into the podcast, I want to thank my sponsors for the podcast. That's Infinite Discs and the Next Generation Tour. They've helped me, Infinite Discs has helped me greatly to succeed in what I'm trying to accomplish with my wife and our core staff. So I want to thank them for being a part of this, and of course the Next Generation Tour, which is the reason why we do this. Alright, so let's get started. The first section on the show is always going to be new releases, and this month what I've decided to do is start with the companies that I played for, and then move my way through them. So I'm going to do 2 or so each show, and what we're going to start with this time is the Innova Corvette. It seems to be about a really hot release, and it's Innova's attempt to make a high-speed driver that's a little more stable than their Shrike, and I'm going to have to say they did it. This is a great disc. I've been testing it, which you can see the wear on it. So it's obviously, something I've been throwing, and my testers have thrown it. But what I can tell you is, this is a really good disc. When you first pick it up, it feels good in the hand. It has the Innova rim where you can really get your fingers under it, and that plastic is that consistent star plastic type that they always put out. So overall, I'm going to tell you before we get into the details that I'm giving this disc an A rating. And the reasons is that it is good for all levels. So let's go through those levels. When I said that first level, the 7 to 800, if you're throwing in 30 to 50 mile an hour, this is a really good overstable disc that you can use for skip shots and wind, and it'll give you a little more bang for your buck, let's say. So I think that that's a really good thing. And my 8 to 900 level players tell me when they started to throw at 50 mile an hour that they could get it to flatten up, but it would still hold into headwinds and it would still hold for them. So it was more like a long, flat driver that hooked up. And so they added distance to their game, and it wasn't so understable they couldn't use it. Now as you move up, the 900 to 1,000 level players, they told me that when they juiced up on this thing, that it started to turn, but it flexed. And I think that that's important. I think that for most of the players 9 to 100 to 1,000, this is going to be a great addition to your bag because it allows you to be able to get that extra distance and flex a disc. It has good integrity and comes back, but yet it goes way out there real fast. Now, on the pro level, when I tested it, I noticed that when I really juiced it, it would turn, but I could get it to flex. If I put some height on it or I gave it a little bit of hyzer, it would come back. And for me, I've added it to the bag. Not all discs I test will go directly into the bag, but this one did. I really enjoyed it, and I'm adding it, and I'm using it all the time. I find that if you want to throw long wooded shots and you want to hold one angle, this disc is pretty good at that. It's not going to be a great headwind disc, but if you're throwing it on a tailwind or you're throwing it on a calm day, I think that you'll really enjoy the Corvette. So great job to Innova. This will also be one of the featured products in the next generation player packages. So let's give it a try, and I'll give you some more feedback throughout the year once I've tested it some more. Now, secondly, Latitude's put out some few discs this year. I mean, not one or two, but a few. But the one that I felt like reviewing was the Pioneer. And the reason I chose the Pioneer is because it had a lot of hype around it. The Pioneer was a disc that people were expecting because you could see it on the side of Ricky Wysaki's van all year. The Pioneer. And people are like, when is that coming out? What's a Pioneer? Well, the Pioneer was Latitude's attempt to make a Felon-type disc like they make for Dynamic with a little more stability for Ricky because Ricky really wanted that. And let me tell you, they did it. I'm not trying to, toot their horn because, I'm not playing for them anymore, but they did it. This disc, when I tested it, performed well. When you throw in a lot of the Trilogy products, I would, give an honest take. I would say that, sometimes when they turn, they catch a nose angle and they take a little longer to flex, but they usually flex. This thing did not have that characteristic. This thing, when I turned it, it immediately started to flex. It had big skips off the ground, and I think that they've really hit it out of the park with this, and people are going to be excited. I think that Ricky kind of, maybe missed out here because this is a great disc to put his name on. But let me talk about how it affects everybody in the different levels. I think that all the way up from 700 to top rated Pro, it's going to fit the same characteristic. It's going to be a nice overstable flight disc that you can use in headwinds, for low ceiling shots, and spike hyzers, and anything that you want to use it for. So I think this is good for all levels, and it's also a good sidearm disc. I'm not much of a sidearm thrower, but I gave it a couple tosses, and it feels good for a sidearm grip. Another addition that I noticed is that they've changed their plastic a bit. It has kind of that feel almost like Star Plastic or something like that, one of those the Discraft type ESP. But it has that feel, and I like that. So I think that if you look at it, it's really flat. It doesn't have a dome. Its rim is got the classic Latitude, a little bit not tucked as much as the other brands, but it's such a low profile that you can get your hand around it. So I'm going to have to give this one an A rating too. Not all my discs are going to get A rating that I review, but these first two, both A's. Good job to Latitude, and you'll see this in a lot of players' bags this year. This will not be featured in our Latitude version of the NG Players package, as I feel it's a little too overstable for everybody. So just go out and pick one up yourself and try it, and let's give credit to Thomas Ekstrom and the crew because they're really starting to make some nice discs over Latitude 64. Now, it's time to get into the part of the show, which is the meat and potatoes. It's the heart of the show, and this is the review part. As you can see in front of me here, and you've seen the whole show, I've got 10 different putters in front of me. And what I'm going to do is kind of give you a positive and negative aspect about each putter. And the first thing I want to say is, hey, there are so many putters. I mean, some brands have even 10 putters. So I couldn't review hundreds of putters in one show, or you turn this off and say, man, is he ever going to shut up? That's too many putters. So what I did is I kind of try to pick popular molds and ones that felt good to me from each brand, and we'll review those and I'll give you my feedback. So let's just go ahead and get started. So first things first, I think, let's go with the Prodigy PA1. So here's the PA1. As you can see, it's a really good looking disc. It's got a great feel to it. I like this 300 level plastic. That's why I picked it for this one. It's kind of grippy-ish DX, but not quite DX. It's got a rubber feel, but not too bouncy. I really like it. Now, when looking at the disc in a general review, you'll see that it has a lower profile than most putters. The bead isn't as pronounced, and that it will fit in a shallow hand. So right away it's telling me that it's a little more overstable and that it's pretty good for long spin putts, especially wind. So, that's my first general review of it. Now when using it, I would say that the positives of the disc was that it did hold in the wind, it feels good on the grip, and that for spin putting, I found that it would hold. Now for push putting, I found it a little more difficult because I need something that fills my hand. But for you, if you have a smaller hand, you might be able to use it for push putting. So on the positive note, feels really good, nice profile, holds the wind well. On a negative side, if I had to give it a negative, I would say it's not the best for push putting because it's not high enough to fill the hand for a consistent release. But this might be a great throwing putter. We'll find that out in the next episodes when we do throwing putters and approach discs. Moving along, the next one I'd like to review is the Myth. This is Infinite. As you know, Innova is making discs for Infinite discs now. I'm not required to throw them, so it's not a biased opinion, but this is their Myth. And I chose a stiff one because I like stiff discs. And when you pick this one up as a general review, you'll see that it's taller. It's not quite dagger or whale, but it's definitely taller than most putters. It has this kind of whale edge to it that you saw with Innova discs that has this, that makes it a little different. But when I was putting it, for a review, I found that it felt pretty close to the putters I've used in the past, and I couldn't tell much of a difference other than it hyzered a little more. It hooked up, and maybe that's because it was new, and most of the putters I use are new. Now let's go over the positives and negatives. The positive of this is that it's stiff, it'll go through the wind, and it's great for push putting. The negatives that I could find is that for outside the circle, it's maybe a little too much to keep a line. You have to flex it a little bit to get it to go in the bucket. But overall, the only other negative I could find about this putter is that maybe it's for, if you have a small hand, it might not be perfect for you. But again, this is the Myth by Infinite Discs. And for me, I think that I would like this putter because I like those ones with high beads. Now, next on the list, let's go with the Dagger from Latitude 64. Now, many of you would have thought I would have presented my Dagger, but no, Ricky Wysocki had the most latest Dagger as a gift to me when he was on the team for winning the World Championships. I gave him my signature rights. I had a lot of input in designing this. Me and Thomas Ekstrom worked together to design this putter, as I was trying to get them to design a putter that filled your hand more, a nice tall beaded putter. And they accomplished that for me. As you can see, I'd say between this and the Whale, it's probably one of the tallest putters with a beveled bead on the market. So at first review, you look at it, the one thing that's unique about a Dagger is it's really flat across the top for how tall it is. And that's kind of a signature of the Trilogy putters, in my opinion. And it has a nice edge, but similar to the Myth, but it has a nice bead and it's a little taller. Now, when I think about reviewing this disc, I've had a lot of experience with it, so going out to test it didn't take much effort. But I can tell you that the positives of this is that it takes a lot less effort to putt a Dagger, as it likes to float, and it's easy from 20, 30 feet. You just pop it a little bit and it stays up and goes in. And I like that about it, and that's one of the reasons I had them make it, because I was finding in my older age that when I released my hand, it didn't release as fast as it used to, and I would come up short into the tray a lot, and I thought that making a putter that floats more would make it easier for me to get it above the rim. So that part's true. Now, if I was going to give a negative about it, the negative I would give about the Dagger would be that it's a little floaty, so in headwind situations or on windy days, it may not be your best choice. But overall, I think it's a great disc, and I think that if you're using it on a calm day, you're going to have some great success, because less effort usually means better results. Now, moving right along, I think that the next one I'd like to cover would be the Discmania P2. Now, the reason I chose the P2 over the Psycho, which the Psycho is more like these beaded putters, is because to me it seems like it's one of the more popular Discmania discs over the years, and people really like it. Now, I know they like it for throwing, and which we'll get into in the future, but overall, when you look at the first review of it, it's also very flat across the top. It has a smaller edge here with no bead. Now, when testing it, I can tell you the positives of it is I was able to take this out to 50, 60, 70 feet and throw laser beams right at the basket, and I didn't have to move it much in the air. It would just hold on a straight line and go in. So for me, I think that's pretty good. Now, on a negative of that, I would say that for push putting inside the circle, lob putting, whatever you want to call it, that not having a bead and a place to rest it on my finger made me kind of go like this a lot and trying to find that perfect feel. And so, they have the Psycho if that's what you're into, but again, the positives are that it's great for distance putts, it feels good if they have a nice plastic in it, and the negatives were not the best maybe inside the circle putt unless you're a spin putter. So, overall I think it's a great disc, and it's probably one of their more popular discs from what I've heard, and I think that, give it a shot, you'll enjoy it. I think that it's nice to have a distance putter, and I hope it flies good in the air. I can't wait to test it. Now, moving right along, the next one is Gateway. And one thing that I wanted to say as I'm reviewing these discs is that we are going to be reviewing one disc from each manufacturer that supports the Next Generation Tour. And so, as you can see, there's 10 putters here, and we have 10 manufacturer sponsors this year. So, Gateway. they're on this year, and I'm glad to have them thanks to Gateway. And one thing that has always been popular with Gateway is the Wizard. I mean, it's been their bread and butter. People always refer to their Wizard as one of the better putters in the market, and it's true. I went out and tested it, and as you can see, it's got that medium profile with a solid bead. It is pretty flat across the top, and it's a good putter. Most people would say, if I use a KC Big Bead or I use a Challenger, but if I wasn't sponsored, I'd probably use a Wizard. And that may be true for most players, and I wouldn't disagree with that. When I was testing it, I would say the positives of it is that for all the putters I've been using my whole life, Judges and AVRs, not much difference. It felt the same in the hand. I was able to comfortably release it without wobble, and I found that overall it was really good inside the circle. Now, for a negative review, which is hard to give a Wizard a negative review, but if there's any negativity, I find it difficult to make long putts with this kind of thick beaded putter. So, for outside the circle, you might want to try some of their other models. Just like with the Discmania, they have other models, and most of the companies do. But that's the only negative thing I can find about it. It's a really good plastic. I like them stiff. He made it stiff. So overall, give the Wizard a try. There's a reason that this has been their bread and butter. Now, moving along, let's go to the KC AVR. So the KC AVR, it's a classic. People have been using it for years. Big beaded Innova AVR. And if you take that first profile, you'll see that it's got the bead and it's got the same edge. Very similar to the last disc, the Wizard. But one of the notable differences that you'll see with the KC AVR that I noticed in testing is that there's a little bit of a rise right here on most of the Innova big beads. And what that did for me is it filled the hand. So on a positive review, I would say that the KC AVR fills the hand really nicely and allowed me to put my thumb down with a little more pressure and get a little more pop on it. So I found that it was easier for me to putt from 35 feet with my push putt instead of stopping at the edge of the circle. So that's the positive part of it, and it feels really good. It's that good KC plastic, and this is an older one, so obviously that, had a factor. But on a negative review, I would say it's the same thing as I said before. If you're looking for distance putts, maybe choose one of their other models. I wouldn't say it's the greatest distance putter. And, it's not necessarily the best headwind putter because, it does have a nice dome and it's got that curvature. It does hold into some headwind, but I wouldn't say it's the greatest headwind putter. So overall, I would give this a really positive review because of the feel and just because overall it fits the hand and gives you a clean release. It's a classic. Takayama won all the titles with it, so it's a good disc. So go out and try a KC AVR if you haven't. I'm sure most of you have, as it's one of those discs that's been out for many years. Now, we got 4 left. Let's go with the Legacy. That's also a partner for us this year, the Legacy Clutch. So I chose the Clutch. I know they have other discs like the Hunter and all those others. I chose the Clutch because I thought it was their attempt to make a beaded putter. And if you look at it, one of the major differences between the Legacy discs and the others that I put with the bead is that their bead is much closer to this edge rise right here. And I think that, overall the purpose of that was that it'll give you that same feeling as one of these other discs, but you don't have to have such a big hand like a Dagger or an AVR. So if you have smaller hands and you want to get a nice push putt without wobble, the Clutch could be a good option. Now my first reviews of it, as you look at it, it's flat across the top, very similar to the others. When taking it out, I found that it was really good. I putted it. It kind of felt like to me, almost like a mini AVR or a mini Wizard. It felt good in the hand. I was able to feel the bead on release. Again, I found it was very similar to the beaded putters of the others. Not so great for distance. Again, try one of those other models. But inside the circle, I think they've made a good product here, and I like what they're doing over there at Legacy. I would say that the reason I chose this one, and you'll say, well, why do you choose that shiny plastic? It's just because I like that stamp, the USDGC. They're making a good putter, and you should give it a try. So thanks to Legacy for being a partner. Now we got 3 left. Let's see what we got here. One of our newer partners that people probably haven't heard of is Kostaplast. That's a Swedish company who's making a line of discs of what I consider pretty high quality plastic. And this is one of their, let's say, non-shiny DX versions, which is called the Reiko. And when I look at the Reiko and give it its first review, it's got that puddle top. None of the other putters that we chose had a puddle top. So I'm going to guess when we throw them, and we do the throwing reviews, this is going to be a good overstable thrower. Because when I putted it, I found it was overstable. And I noticed that on a positive, this is really good spin putter with winds and different angles. And for people that putt really hard, it'll hold your spin. And I think that is good. It feels good in the hand for spin putters, and it's got that nice indented rim that lets you grip it. But on a negative, I would say, again, for push putting, it might be a little shallow. It's difficult. It feels like I got a lot of hand on it. So maybe not the best for push putting, but I'm sure they got other models that you could try for that. So the Reiko, again, review, very good spin putter. And overall, it's going to hold the wind pretty well. And I think the reason for that is you got to think they're a Swedish company, and it's pretty windy in Sweden, if you know what I mean. So give that a try. You might be pretty impressed. Now, what's left is MVP joined us this year, and I chose the MVP spin. And the reason I chose that is because of all the putters they sent me, it felt like the most like a putter. And we'll get into the MVs and all those other ones when we do the reviews of the other putters and throwing putters, but I thought the spin, was a good putter. And first review, when you look at it, it's similar to the other brands where it has the flat top, but if you notice, it's almost the puddle top, but not quite. And this edge is higher than the middle, so I like that. One of the other things you notice is it doesn't have a bead, and the edge here isn't as long as the others. And it has this rubber stripping around the outside. So one of the first things people think of is, well, is that rubber stripping going to cause it to bounce out? And I don't think that's the case. I've spent a little time playing with Matt Dollar and John Matlack and the Robinsons and all those people who are throwing MVP now, and they'll tell you that, no, their putts don't pop out. Matter of fact, it might grab the chains. So who knows what the factor is, but I don't think it's going to cause it to bounce out. On the positive things that I found right away is that this just has a unique flight. That it's able to turn and hold turns without kind of moving to the right. It'll hold that turn angle, but still kind of go straight and hook up. And I've watched Matt Dollar do that quite a bit, so I think that's a great positiveness about it. I think that it's really good spin putter. That's why it's called the spin, obviously. I think that, they have other putters with beads that'll be better for push putting. You should try those. But overall, this is a good spin putter, and I've seen a lot of positive results. I mean, Matt Dollar beat me last year in a playoff using this disc. So, real great disc. On a negative review, I would just say that the only negativity I see about it is just take some time to get used to. It's got a different feel to it than most putters. It does have a different in-depth thing here going on. The way it rolls up to the disc, that's also unique. I don't know that's a negative, but it's definitely different. So it takes some time to get used to. And I found that this one doesn't hold as well in the wind as some of the other stuff they're making, but overall, it's good for most days. So give the spin a try. I think it's a quality disc, and let's give a thanks to MVP. Now, finally, last but not least, of course, Discraft. They joined us this year, and the one I chose is the Luna. Now, I could have chose, a Jawbreaker Challenger or, any of their other choices. But I chose this because this is a big talk on the market right now, and people are really into it. Now, I know that Paul's told me personally that they're going to be changing the plastic, and it's going to have a different look to it because it's going to have little black specks in it or something like that. But overall, they called it the Luna because of this finish that it has. It has this unique finish. And I'm going to tell you right away, I thought it was pretty cool. If you look at it, it's flat. It has no bead. So it's unique, and it's a little thinner. So for spin putters, they're probably going to love it. So on a positive review, I found that spin putting it was great. I was able to float. It almost floated as much as a dagger or a whale. I was able to put it in the air and just let it sit on that line, and it didn't fight to hyzer so much. Now, as a come to a negative review, the only thing I would say is that it does float a lot, so that's a little dangerous for headwind days. And the fact that there isn't a bead for inside the circle putting. So if you're a push putter, you might find it a little difficult to work with, so try their Challenger maybe. But if you're a spin putter, this is going to be a smooth release. I think they've really got something here with the way they've rounded the edge for releasing your spin putt. And it obviously works because Paul Macbeth, as I heard, just played 3 rounds in Brooksville, Florida without missing a putt inside the circle. So obviously it's a good putter. So in review, the one thing I want to talk about putters is what are the things that I used to come up with these ratings and how I came up with what I said. Is the things that old pros used to talk about is shiny putters will slip through the basket because when it's wet out or stuff like that. I don't really believe in that, but some of the things I was consistently thinking about was how do they perform in the wind. That's why I mentioned it. How does it feel in the hand? Does it fill your hand? Is it designed for a large hand or a small-handed person? Is there a bead that sits into your groove? As you know, in the past, I've always talked about having a bead sit in this groove so that it's a consistent release. So these are some of the things I looked at, and reviewing putters is not easy because they're not flying as much. You don't see their flights. It's mostly preference. And that's the last thing I wanted to go on, is talk about preference. So as many of you know, I have my choice, and each time I do a review, I'm going to let you know what I'm choosing. And now it's definitely not always going to be the same brand, but for this one, I chose KC AVR. And the reason I chose the KC AVR is not because it's better than any of these. That is not what I'm saying. It's, like I said, it's all about comfortability. Like I said, it's all about comfortability. And what's important is that it feels good in your hand. And because I trained with this putter for a decade, my hand width and how I squeeze a disc, I was always trying to get Latitude to mimic that for me, because that's something that I was used to. And when I was given choice, you know, to throw what I want, I pulled one of these out just for fun, and I squeezed it with my eyes closed, and it fills my hand. And right away, I noticed that when I was putting, I don't do this spin thing anymore that I used to do. It's because right away it feels good in my hand. So for me, it just feels good because of all the years and my muscles being used to it. It's not the best putter on the market, because putters are based on preference. And does it hold into the wind the best? No, it doesn't. You know, I have to step up and throw other discs when it's really windy for long putts and stuff like that. So it's just, for me, this year I'll be using the KC AVR for my putting to start the season. That could change, but that's how I'm going to start. And that's putter reviews. So in the next show, don't worry, we'll be covering putters approaching, throwing them, and those in-between discs like Cenuses and Zones and A2s from Prodigy and MVs and all these different approach putters. We'll go over those in the next show. And then I'll let you know what I'm throwing there, and I can tell you that it's not an Innova or a Latitude, so there's a little surprise for you. But here you go. This is my KC 10-time AVR, back in the bag. Okay, now I wanted to go to the part of the show that I told you about, which is called Mail Call. Mail Call is a place where you guys can write in a question to david.feldberg@nextgendiscgolf.com, and I will answer your questions online. If I choose your question, I will immediately send you a disc in the mail from Next Generation Tour. So feel free to email me, and if I choose your question, you're a lucky winner. So for the first show, it was very difficult. I didn't have this opportunity to get this information out to you. So I get a lot of questions, like a lot of the top pros, through Facebook and different emails, and I just picked a couple questions that have been asked to me over and over again. And what's been asked to me a lot this year is, what is your favorite disc? So that's the first question. What's my favorite disc? And I tell you, I'm not a guy that's really big on favorite things. I don't have a favorite food I always eat, or a favorite restaurant, or a favorite team. I like variety. So for me, picking a favorite disc has been a really hard topic. I will say what I prefer is a fairway driver. I like the way a fairway driver feels in my hand. It's not too wide where it's uncomfortable. It never hurts when I throw it. And I like an overstable fairway driver. Currently, I've been throwing a Triple X and an Eagle X, and I've messed around with an Undertaker and a Vulture and some other discs on the market for sure. And Costa Plus Stall, I think, is one I've tried. But in general, I like that type of disc. And the reason is I like to break them in, and then they'll fly all the angles. If you get an overstable fairway driver, you can break it in, and it can do the understable flight, but still have integrity because it used to be an overstable disc. So when you rip it at 60 or 70, it'll flip. But when it runs out of speed, it'll act like it did when it was new. And I like that predictability and throwing tighter S-curve lines instead of wider S-curve lines. So if I had to pick favorite disc, I would say a broken-in overstable fairway driver. Now, question 2. And this has been a popular topic. I got a lot of questions on this as we're partnered with the Disc Golf Pro Tour. Dave, what do you feel about all this Steve Dodge stuff that's going around? Well, I will say, you know what? Let's give Steve Dodge a break. I know that video was pretty funny and people liked it, but overall, Steve Dodge is trying to do a lot of positive things for the sport. And what you have to realize is that if you want to take the sport to the next level, you have to own your own footage. Think about the NFL, NHL. They all have rights reserved. That's because the organization owns their own footage. And from what I understand, the companies that were filming for them, they own the footage and put it on their own channels. And Steve wanted to take that progress to the next step, and that would be owning his own footage. So I know a lot of you have given him a hard time out there, and I understand that there was a little bit of communication that was lost and things have happened, but, you know, he's trying to move the sport forward, and let's give the guy a break. Without him, there wouldn't be a Disc Golf Professional Tour other than the national tour out there. And I think that many of the pros enjoy it, the coverage, the media, the overall following, and little things that Steve does. So I just want to say, yes, let's watch it grow. It takes time for things to grow, but let's give Steve Dodge a break. He's a great guy, and, you know, if it doesn't work by mid-season, then he got something to complain about. But until then, I'm sure that in the beginning of Jomez and Central Coast and Terry, that they made a lot of mistakes, and you guys didn't give them such a hard time. That's because it was new. And now that you got used to a standard, you're trying to hold the new people to that standard. And sure, it'd be nice if they walked out and went right to that standard, but they may exceed that standard. So give them a chance before you start giving them such a hard time. Because we support the Disc Golf Pro Tour, and we appreciate everything Steve Dodge does. Now we're into the next section, which I call NG Corner. So the Next Generation Corner is about me highlighting certain people and giving away something. It's an NG giveaway and a highlight. So let's start by going over a highlight. We have added a team, the Next Generation Tour team. And what I wanted to talk about was each show will highlight, just real quick, it won't take a lot of time, to go over a player from each level of our team. So on the national level, I wanted to go and introduce our first player as Kevin Jones. That's right, Kevin Jones from Greenwood, Arkansas. He's been on tour making waves. His rating's 1030. He's got his first win at the Crush on the Concho over there in Texas, and he's starting to heat up. So look for Kevin Jones. He's supporting the NG Tour, going to be quite involved, and let's support him out there. Thanks, Kevin, for being a part of this. Now, let's talk about our premier team, which we think are some of the best amateurs in the world who played on the Next Generation Tour. The first one I want to highlight is Andrew Cornwell from Pittsboro, Indiana. Andrew Cornwell is a 977 rated amateur/pro who just took his first cashing in 3rd place this year in his first pro event. And he had finished really well on the Next Generation Tour. He was somewhat one of the favorites coming into the final. And he finished 11th place. It wasn't one of his best finishes, but you can see the talent and ability he has, so we believe in him. It looks to be a great pro in the future, and that's why we put him on the team. We totally believe in Andrew Cornwell and that he can take that next step. So here's a shout out to Andrew Cornwell. Keep sticking with it, buddy. First event, first cash. That's what we're talking about. Now we also support a lot of TDs and promoters on our exclusive team, and this time I want to highlight a guy who's been with us from the beginning. His name is Mark Kilmer, PJ number 10108. Mark has been a fantastic TD. He is out of the Fort Steilacoom, Washington area, and what he has been doing is running a disc golf armory truck that sells at the courses. He puts in courses, he runs tournaments. He's one of the most involved guys in the Northwest and the Next Generation Tour. He's our head over there in the Northwest, and he really got things going for us. He'll be hosting a handful of events throughout the year, and he'll be hosting a premier event at Milo MacGyver State Park. As usual, he'll be the TD. Don't miss out on that event. And a little highlight to his play, it's not like he's just a TD. He's at Grandmaster's age, and he played in over 10 events last year in the Grandmasters. He never finished worse than 4th place. So just to let you know, Mark's got a little game. He also plays on the World Match Play team. He's the captain and puts it together every year, and he keeps bringing home that trophy for USA, so we're proud of him. Thanks, Mark, for all your work that you do. Now, let's get to the NG giveaway. How the giveaway works every time is our tour will give away a product on this show for anybody who has played an event between the 2 shows. So it's the first show. It's early in the season. It just started last week. We had 1 event, but we had 38 players over there at Browns and Bows here in Northern California. And Chip Frink, the TD, put on an exciting event. Well, I've looked through the things and I did a drawing, and it looks like to me the winner is going to be Chris Isom of Tiburon, California. Chris is a Masters age player who played in the event, and he had great spirit, I heard. And so Chris, go ahead. If your address is incorrect, then let us know. But if not, you'll receive something in the mail from Next Generation Tour, and we appreciate your participation. We give a shout out to Chip for running a great event, and just the beginning to the season. And if you're interested in our events, we got a one at the Roots in Utah next week, and we have a lot more events coming in the future, over 150 on the tour already. So go ahead and check the nextgenerationtour.com schedule, which is nextgendiscgolf.com. Go to schedule, check an event in your area, and get ready to play. Also, we're going to be running tons of contests on our Facebook page. Every week we're giving away multiple products from all of our multiple sponsors. So go to our Facebook page, like us, and then you'll find out about our giveaways whenever we start doing them. They will probably start next week, and they'll be going for the rest of the year. 25 weeks of giveaways. So tune in to nextgenerationtour.com and check our Facebook page. Give us a like, and maybe you'll win something. Finally, at the end of every podcast, I wanted to cover a part called Legends of the Game. Now, what I mean by Legends of the Game are these are players in my mind who have competed at a very high level and embody the spirit of the game, but haven't quite yet made the Hall of Fame. And I find that to be interesting. I have nothing wrong with the Hall of Fame, as I hope to be a part of it someday. But I looked over their standards of what it takes, you know, be in good standing, all these other different things, play for 15 years. And the players that I'll be highlighting in each episode have qualified, in my mind, for the Hall of Fame. And maybe they are on the minds of the voters that are in the Hall of Fame, but they're not quite in yet. So the first one I want to highlight is PDJ number 5557. That's right, that's the great Mike Mosier, formerly known as the Delaware Deucer or the Manassas Mauler. That's right, the Manassas Mauler. What a nickname. That's because he used to go around and just clean clocks. I mean, he put up scores and put together win after win after win. 230 plus wins out of 580 starts. Do the math on that. That's over 40%. Every 2 times out of 5 he walks out to a disc golf course for 3 decades, he won the tournament. So that's something to take into consideration. Mike also had 7 top 10 Worlds finishes. Only 2 to 3 times when he attended the Worlds he finished out of the top 10, and that was also in the top 20. Mike has been a fantastic player now that he's turned Masters age. He's won national tours, A tiers. He's never really finished out of the top 5 at the Worlds. He's made multiple finals. And now he's approaching Grandmasters age, and I can't imagine what he's going to do to people in that. Knowing Mike, though, he probably won't play Grandmasters until he's about 58. So good luck with that. Other things that I want to talk about Mike is his skill level. Mike embodies that thing that we're talking about when you talk about a Hall of Fame type player. It's that gamemanship, that want to win, that above and beyond ability that puts people in a separate category. Well, let's talk about Mike. 1990, Mike entered the PDGA. He played his first intermediate tournament in the spring. Guess what? He won. Then he went to Advanced, the very next event. Guess what? He went to a 3-way playoff, and in his very first playoff in disc golf, he won. So that, catapulted him to pro, and for the next couple years, he played pro. And in 1993, he headed over to Virginia and won his first tournament against Craig Gangloff in a 2-way playoff. That was pretty exciting for him, and so it gave him some confidence. And by the end of the year, he had won his first A tier, the Baltimore Open, also over Craig Gangloff. And I say Craig Gangloff, he was one of the top players on the East Coast at the time. Everybody knew him. He traveled internationally, and he was a great player. So beating him was nothing to laugh at. So, when you look at that, you think to yourself, wow, Mike Mosier must have been a special player because he continued to fight, and he just started to get better and better. And to talk about Mike's skills, Mike wasn't known as a distance thrower. He's one of the best woodsmen to ever play the game. He hits the gaps, and he's consistent. If you ever go up against him in the woods somewhere, doesn't matter if he's 50 or 60 by then, he's probably going to give you a run for your money. And he was also known for making a lot of spin putts. When he was on fire, he may have been one of the best in the world, but he's definitely one of the top 3 spin putters that ever lived. He puts it in the basket with that pink grid AVR and sends it away. So I just want to give Mike a great shout out here, and hopefully he'll someday be in the Hall of Fame, because Mike Mosier, you're truly a legend of the game. All right, let's end this podcast by saying thank you so much for listening to me here on Disc Golf and Honest Take, a new podcast sponsored by Infinite Disc and the Next Generation Tour. And one thing I have to say, all this is possible because of my sponsors, my staff, all the sponsors that sponsor the Next Generation Tour, all of the volunteers that have helped us over the time. That's who makes it happen. And of course, and not to be forgotten, is my wife Cynthia Whitaker and co-owner of Next Generation Tour. I've got to thank her for stepping up and giving me the opportunity and support that it takes to make these kind of things happen. Without her, I couldn't have done it, and she helped me bring in our new son, Leo Max Feldberg, PDJ number 22626. A little shout out to my little guy. Yeah, you're the spot that's making everything go in our world, and we really appreciate it. So, until next time, tune in to Disc Golf and Honest Take. We'll be here with reviews, we'll honor some legends, we'll do some giveaways. Thank you, this has been Dave Feldberg, and we look forward to speaking to you again.